The artists whom Nietzsche saw around him, those whose gifts were the greatest, attested to a kind of loss. They were what he called decadents, not because they lacked talent or their art was not impressive, but because their works were laments of artistic impotence, characterizations of an ugly world that the poets believe they cannot influence. Immediately after the French Revolution, and this did happen a little bit later with music, immediately after the French Revolution, there had been a stupendous artistic effervescence, and poets thought they could again be legislators of mankind. The vocation provided for the artists in the new philosophy of culture heartened them, and a new classic age was born. Idealism, romanticism, appeared to be carved out of a place for the sublime in the order of things. But within a generation or two, the mood had noticeably soured, and artists began to represent the romantic visions as a groundless hoax. This happened definitely, I would say, probably a decade or two before World War I. So it was a little bit later with music, probably not as much as it was with visual art. I don't know visual art history that well. But this idea that after the French Revolution, there was this inherent need, and I know this to be true in music history, to build the individualism, the sense of adventure, the romanticism, the beauty, that artistic effervescence. And then history started, just the events of the history really started sullying that experience where artists started thinking, this is all vanity, this is all fodder, this is, high art is kind of snobbish, it should be snubbed as vanity, and not just high art in general, but culture in general. So what happened with that was you could be a very talented artist, but you really couldn't. It's common practice, especially with postmodern artists or postmodernists, to be even if you're very capable and very talented, your role really is to showcase impotent art. Like, it doesn't take that much to do something. It doesn't take much skill to do something, because high art, or beautiful expression and effervescence and wonderful skill building and making it is a sign of snobbishness. Or snobbery, I should say. I think that's a word, right? It's to help you understand that the world really is not what it's cut out to be. So that adventurousness, that wonder, that beauty really did fall by the wayside. I don't know in visual art, as far as painting and sculpting and all of that, but in music, it was getting into, I would say, I kind of want to say actually into World War I, after World War I. It was a little bit later in music, but it was still that same attitude, that same trajectory. And so where does that lead us today? Well, in popular art, again, like, you don't have to have things that make sense narratively speaking or structurally speaking, but as long as it looks pretty, it's fine, and it's gonna be successful. I will actually, I don't know whether it's gonna be a streaming video or it will definitely be a streaming video, but I might do a fixed video on it too. I'm not sure. But I really want to talk about the tragedy of Star Wars sequel trilogy. And maybe your first reaction is like, again, Michelle, you've done this so many times. But actually, I haven't really talked about the tragedy that no one is talking about when it comes to Star Wars sequel trilogy. And that is, Rian Johnson had very nihilistic, I would say J.J. Abrams too, I'm sorry, J.J. Abrams as well, had very nihilistic nuances. I mean, pretty bold nuances of nihilism and meaninglessness in that sequel tragedy. But the real tragedy that no one talks about, and I think this is really, really important, is Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams had billions of dollars behind them to do a nihilistic, postmodernistic project. If they didn't do it without the money, of course they wouldn't have their audience, and they wouldn't be known. But more than that, because they had the budget and they had the brand, they could dress up their nihilism in all the pretty pictures and all the beautiful sound and all the music. And nothing against John Williams, but they had John Williams. They had John Williams, they had the state-of-the-art sound design, they had the state-of-the-art visuals. They dressed up nihilism in a very, very pretty package. And I think that's the most insidious part of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where the story didn't live up to the visual standards and the sound standards and the music standards. Really, really bizarre and striking. But I think that actually is one of the biggest tragedies of that whole project, is that it was a nihilistic storyline. It was a nihilistic narrative. And it was dressed up in the prettiest way imaginable. And we all gobbled it up. I was one of those people until the prof showed me the light.